are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Ruff.
And I'm Aviva Nebeski.
We're the hosts of the Dressage Today podcast, where you can find us talking about anything and everything dressage related. Our conversations span the world of dressage, from leading riders to local level dressage heroes. We're talking training advice, showing tips, and sharing stories to inspire your own dressage journey. So tune in, then tack up. Welcome to the Dressage Today podcast, sponsored by Wellness Ready. Later, we'll be talking to Ida Norris, USEF licensed S judge, and a large R Western Dressage judge. But before we get to her conversation, I wanted to share a few details about the upcoming World Cup. So
jealous.
I know. I wish you could come.
Me too.
It's gonna be good. I will be there along with my coworkers Julia and Sandy, and we will be covering both the dressage and the show jumping for Practical Horseman and Dressage Today. So if you're not able to come, you can keep up with us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. But if you are in fact coming to Omaha, we also will have a booth in the expo area. And I want to let everybody know that we are working on having some special guests and special events at the booth. I can't say what they are yet because we're still working on the details, but it'll be good. So just trust me on that. And when we get it solidified, we'll put all the details about where and when and times and that sort of thing on the social media accounts. So it's coming up fast.
It is coming up fast, and I know you're going to have an amazing time. And I will be following rabidly.
Yes. Yeah.
On Facebook. I don't Instagram or TikTok, but I will be on the Facebook page. So
we'll be there. We'll be all over. And it will be live streamed through the FEI if you have an account there. But otherwise, you'll have to just keep in tune for all the stuff. Other than that, Aviva and I don't have a whole lot going on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to compete with the World Cup, okay?
Right. That's going to take precedence for now. We'll be back on our own stuff next month.
Plus, we have a very exciting conversation with Ida Norris. I'm thrilled that we got the opportunity to talk to her. She's a very good friend and a fabulous judge and really committed to Western dressage. And I think our conversation is going to be amazing.
Yeah. And so if anyone is even remotely interested or curious, they will definitely want to stay tuned for that.
Yes.
Our Ask the L question this month is not so much a question, but more of a request. And it comes from Caitlin. Okay. And she requested that you please explain what the judge means by the comments needs more ground cover and show more distance. And before you say anything, I will say that I get the show more difference. I have gotten that quite a few times from quite a few judges in my dressage history. So I think those are two very, very common comments for a lot of riders from a lot of judges.
Okay, I those are comments that I do use a lot. The needs more ground cover, Caitlin, we tend to use that in two places. We definitely use that when we're talking about the lengthened, medium, extended gaits. I think that's pretty self-evident. A working trot or a collected trot, you want to see the horse actually, if not over tracking, at least tracking up. In the lengthening of gaits, the medium and the extended, we want even more ground cover. So if you were to watch where your horse's front foot hits, you want to see in the lengthenings that hind foot goes in front of the hoof print of the front foot. Pretty self-evident, right? The same thing with the canter. Just literally cover more ground. So one of the wonderful exercises you can do to see whether in fact you are covering more ground is go down your long side, either the canter, the trot, whatever, and count your strides from one corner to the other. And then go down your next long side and see if you can cover that long side with fewer steps.
Right.
If you make it down your long side in, let's say, 20 canter strides, and you make it down your next long side in 19 canter strides, you are definitely covering more ground, but not a whole lot, right?
Yeah.
So working on maybe being able to cover your long side on 17 or 18 canter strides. Remembering, of course, that there is more to it than just covering ground. You're also talking about balance. You're talking about frame. You're talking about suspension. But if you're getting the comment, needs more ground cover, probably you're just not showing enough of a difference between the gait that you're starting in, whether that's the working gait or the collected gait, and the gait that you're supposed to be showing. You will also frequently see that in the walk. If you read the definition of the walk, both the medium and the free walk are defined as having overtrack. So you can have a super sexy free walk where your horse is really stretching out and swinging through their backs, and you think it's wonderful, and the judge sees that, yeah, your horse is really relaxed, but you're still 3 inches shy of even tracking up, let alone over tracking. You're going to get the comment, something like relaxed and stretching needs more ground cover. So it is a very literal statement that you need to be going across the ground bigger than what you have demonstrated.
Right.
Hopefully that made sense. As far as the show more difference, you are talking again about a transition either from the working trot or the working canter to the lengthened trot or canter, or you're looking at from collection to medium or collection to extended. And what the judge wants to see is that there is that it is identifiable that you have changed the length of the stride of the gait, that you have shown a difference in the suspension and the lift and the balance in the gait from the working or the collected to the lengthened or medium or extended. As you go up the levels, we also want to see that difference is fairly crisp. So tied in with that comment of show more difference, you may also see something like fades or slow to develop.
Yeah.
So you may demonstrate a brilliant trot lengthening across the diagonal, but it took you all the way until X to get there. And you didn't show very many steps because you faded before you got all the way across the diagonal, or you got across the diagonal and nothing happened. You were still doing your lengthening as you went through the short side. What we'd like to see is that, all things being equal, that we can tell that you've just done something, that you are meeting the definition of what the new transition within the gait actually is. Not that you go down the long side in, quote, lengthened canter, and all you're doing is basically galloping. You're going faster.
Right.
It's very powerful and it's very exciting, but the only difference is the tempo. So if you read carefully the definitions of each one of these gaits and the transitions within the gaits and the definitions of the differences in the gaits, I think, Caitlin, that'll explain to you a little bit better about what those comments mean.
Very good.
Okay.
Have you ever gotten those comments?
Of course. Because I have more time I want to admit to.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yep. I hear you.
To develop and fades. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's all a big work in progress.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for that answer. And as always, if people have more questions, we are always looking, Aviva's always looking for more questions to answer. So if you have a burning question about showing or judging, please reach out to us on our social media. When we return, our conversation with Ida Norris. Did you know that 90% of all laminitis cases are caused by excess insulin production? What if we told you that you can find out your horse's insulin level and laminitis risk in a matter of minutes? There's a new tool in the fight against laminitis, Wellness Ready. Wellness Ready is the first and only stall-side blood test that allows you to instantly determine a horse's risk for laminitis. No more waiting a week for lab results. Wellness Ready delivers an accurate, real-time insulin reading in minutes. This potentially life-saving tool allows veterinarians to identify and manage horses prone to founder due to underlying endocrine disorders such as equine metabolic syndrome and equine's Cushing's disease. Join the fight against laminitis and talk to your vet about the Wellness Ready stall-side insulin test. It can save time, money, and potentially a life. Visit wellnessready.com for more information. Ida Norris started riding Western as a girl and was even the 1978 Maine Appaloosa Queen. Her extensive dressage background includes 8 years as a youth taking lessons with Olympian Michael Poulin, work with German judge Maria Zimmer, and work primarily in Portugal with Nuno Oliveira. Kathy Connelly was instrumental in polishing her test riding skills at the FEI level, and Bo Jenå's work with Ida has developed her skill in classical longlining. She currently clinics regularly with Arthur Kottas, Bo Jenå, and Janet Foy. She has trained and ridden horses to numerous USEF and USDF awards, and she is a USDF Gold, Silver, and Bronze Medalist. All of the awards she earned were on horses she trained herself. She is also a Western Dressage Level 5 competitor, a USEF S Senior Dressage Judge, and a USEF Large R Western Dressage Judge. Her recreational riding and horse activities include working equitation, extreme obstacle challenges, and international agility. Ida, I would like to thank you for joining us today on the Dressage Today podcast.
Thank you. It's nice to talk to you, Stephanie, and hi, Aviva.
So we're going to jump right into the questions here. And, you spent many years as a traditional dressage rider and judge, but you have made a bit of a switch to Western dressage. And what is it about Western dressage that attracted you?
Well, it's one of those things that hardly anyone knows, but I was that 10-year-old kid that wanted a horse. We all have that story, and got the parents to buy the horse. And wouldn't you know, we bought a 2-year-old with 30 days training that came with a Western saddle. Oh, dear. And we had no idea, innocence abroad. So I couldn't ride the thing one-handed. Everyone else was horse showing, but I couldn't control the thing. So I made up my mind, these English people, they ride with 2 hands. I should go English. I was the only kid in my county trying to ride hunt seat. And meanwhile, down the road is Michael Poulin, an hour down the road. And he's changing over from saddle seat to dressage. So I get pulled into dressage. And my parents begin to do horses, and they're riding my dad Western, and my mom takes up English with me and goes and takes riding lessons with Michael Poulin, and we're doing our thing, and we're riding Western and saddle seat and hunt seat. And we were breeding Appaloosas and Arabs. And so we're in the show rings riding horsemanship, changing the saddles. So I've always ridden Western. And when I became kind of this dressage queen as I got older, I kind of had to hide the fact that I'd been the Maine Appaloosa Queen, the 1978 Maine Appaloosa Queen. I'd been to the Nationals, and my dressage horse was winning the ladies' Western pleasure classes.
I love
you're
that.
Hiding your Western saddle in the back so that the clients don't see your saddle, gee. It's pretty funny. So the long and the short of it is I've always kind of ridden Western, and my Western saddle's always been here. And, you know, I was a closet rider.
Right. So you're returning back to your roots is what you're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. So it's a lot of fun. You know, it's like, yes, it's dressage based, but you know, the tack's different, but the work is, it's the same. You know, good horsemanship is just good riding, good horsemanship. So it's fun. It's fun.
Well, that's my question for you. I mean, I judge schooling shows and I judge Western dressage occasionally, and you know, obviously lots of traditional dressage. And I tend to try to look at them with the same eye. Is that correct, or are they different?
Well, they are the same and they are different. So here's the part. Currently, right now, dressage, our regular DR, does not have some of the movements that we have in WD, and some of those movements are the movements that we're not currently exhibiting in DR is side pass, turn on the forehand, and in Western dressage at the upper levels, we also have pivots. So those are actually different, and judges, you know, have to educate themselves about the requirements of those movements and what's expected. What is different, I think, is the focus of Western dressage. And you can tell that from our mission statements are completely different. USDF mission statement says that we're developing horses to be, you know, equine athletes to go to the Olympics. And that's our end goal. And it says that right in our mission statement. Whereas the mission statement for Western dressage says that we're developing horses for safe, very steady, harmonious riding. It says in the mission statement that we're providing a home, an activity, a competition for horses that may come from other divisions, that may need a second or third opportunity for a job, that we will encourage all breeds, every breed, that we include mules, you know. So it's a entirely different mission statement, and harmony, rideability, and safety is the number one priority of Western dressage, as opposed to extreme athleticism. So we're saying that we're interested in using all of the dressage principles, all the wonderful principles of dressage, to improve average, normal horses.
That's a beautiful way to address things.
Yeah.
It's exciting. You know, it's the way when I started in dressage in the 1970s. Oops, age note.
Okay, I know how old you are. I'm still older than you are.
When I started, you know, then there I was on an Appaloosa Arab, so that was, you know, weird. But, everybody just had any old horse that they had, and it was the horses that were well schooled, quiet in the ring, properly trained, that were, I won't say winning, because you don't win every class, but you know, you're always placed because you had a really well-schooled horse. And that's what dressage was about. And dressage was about making every horse better, and pretty much everyone had an average horse. They didn't have any exceptional movers. And eventually, you know, warm bloods come in and kind of blow everyone else away,
right,
gait-wise. And our breeders have continued to breed incredibly athletic horses. But in the beginning, most of us were on pretty average horses. And Western dressage is where these middle-class people are with average horses. I mean, obviously, you need a horse with a clear walk, jog, and lope, you know, to be rhythmic and clear in the rhythm. But because the coefficients and the emphasis in the judging is on if the horse is really on the aids and attentive to the rider and well schooled, those horses are successful, and they're very successful in the ring. And so it's fun. It's really interesting that the emphasis is a little different focus.
No, that is definitely.
In traditional dressage, we're looking, honestly, we're looking for the big flashy gaits. And in Western dressage, you're looking for the harmony. And it's a shame that traditional dressage has moved away from that.
Well, I think so, but I love both divisions. I mean, I was a dressage queen forever. And when I started out, it was more this emphasis that WD has, and I think it has changed. But what I do find now about teaching and judging Western dressage and coaching people in it, this focus on safety and rideability is the number one thing. And for example, like there are very few rule differences, but one of the rules, which I absolutely love it, is, in dressage, in DR, we have the list of eliminations, and that's, you're an improper entry, cruelty, lameness. There's a whole list of things to be eliminated for. And that list is almost the same in WD. It's very similar, except for, which I love this, is, what does it say? It says, if the horse bucks, kicks, rears, strikes, it's it says clear disobedience. You're eliminated. I don't have to wait 20 seconds and have a heart attack that the horse is going to flip over. This is a clear elimination. There's no question about this. You can't question the judge's call. You're out. Because this is about safety and average people being able to ride horses.
Yeah.
Which, I'm like, this is great. Now it's about average, cool, neat horses and riders experiencing confidence, being able to go into the ring. And, people avoid the good old-fashioned word in Western of the word broke. It didn't have a bad connotation years ago. It meant that the horse was super safe. It was reliable for all riders. It wasn't a bad PC word. And I still like that connotation, and I search for the right words to express to people, I need your horse to be more tame. It isn't just about, can you go out and do half pass? Can you, reliably, will it stand at the block while you get on?
Right.
Do you think that the WDAA is doing a good job of educating the public and dressage riders and judges so that the WD riders at schooling shows run by the USDF GMOs are getting a fair shake? Or do you think that people like me are still struggling to figure out what it is we're watching?
Well, tricky question. I don't want to point the finger at anybody here, but let me share some thoughts with you about this, because I think we might be looking at this the wrong way. WDAA is amazing in that they do have tremendous judges programs, and their judges programs are very similar to our L and small R programs and large R programs. There's testing, they're extensive, but they're open to the public. And I've just come from one that was in Colorado in February, and we had so many auditors in there, and we don't require our auditors to be quiet. They can ask questions, they can talk to the judges afterwards, they can integrate.
Oh, wow.
They got all the materials. They could pay and get all the materials that I got if they wanted to.
Wow.
So the programs are in place, and there's tons of clinics. So you can go to a clinic. Then people like me, I'll take your call. I'll take anybody's call. If anybody is thinking that they're going to judge some WD and they have a question, I'm not saying I'm an expert, and I'm not saying that my job is just to teach judges, so don't misunderstand. But colleagues call all the time and ask me, hey, do you know blah, blah, blah rule? Because I'm on the rules committee. And if I don't know, I find out for them, or I help them, or I talk to them. So I'll take a call and help an L who's going to judge. But here's the thing. Responsibility is always on the organizer. The organizer is supposed to hire people that are trained to judge what they're offering.
Yeah.
And if you're at a USEF licensed show, that is their legal responsibility to hire a judge with the license that matches. Now,
Right.
so the GMO has a responsibility here to ask the people they're hiring, are you comfortable with this? Are you educated in this? How are you doing? Can we help you? Do you need any information? And the judges themselves really have to educate themselves. And I get asked sometimes to judge something that I haven't judged for a while. Like sometimes I get some para classes and I don't get a lot of para classes. And I have to bone up for a week or two ahead of time to be sure that I'm up on the newest rules. That's a judge's responsibility, and it's their ethics that they turn down those jobs that aren't right. If they don't know the rules. But here's something exciting. The WD rules that are in the USEF rule book, so, online you can go and look at the rules and you can print them out. They're only 36 pages. Well, there's only fewer. I know, there's only 18 pieces of paper. I print that out 3 or 4 times a year and stick it in a notebook and keep it highlighted. Like any L can read 18 pages of rules. A lot of them are similar. And there's just a few different, like riders are allowed to softly use their voice. They're allowed to softly pat their horse. There's a few rules like the elimination rule for bucking or rearing, but most of the rules are almost the same, so they just have a few more rules to learn or a little different slant on the rules. So reading the rules. And then, those tests are just amazing because just like DR tests, WD tests have right past where it says what you're going to do, enter A, X, halt, salute, proceed, working, jog. The next column over on the test tells the judge exactly how we want it judged. It'll say, straightness, looking for energy in the gait, prompt and immobile halt, steady move off. There's directives of how to judge it. So if the judge would study the tests ahead of time, there's half of their education. So I feel like WD is doing a good job. But what I feel like is those people that complain that they didn't get a well-educated judge, that GMO let them down and that judge let them down.
Right.
That's a good point. I know the first time I was asked to judge Western Dressage, the organizer asked me if I was comfortable. And I said, I've never judged it. I'll get back to you. And I went online and I Googled and I watched videos and I read the rule book and I did all of that. And I thought, I think I understand it. And so I called the organizer back and I said, I think I understand it, but I want you to let your competitors know that I am not a licensed WD judge and that I will give them the best that I can, but that I am not as educated as I should be. So that the competitors could make the decision not to ride for me.
But that was very ethical of you, and you did the right thing. And that's just what you should do. Try to educate yourself, and let all your people know. Like I don't know a licensed WD judge that won't take a phone call from somebody. Like I'll take a phone call anytime anybody has a question, and they'll help each other and they'll help people. So feel free to call on colleagues, because we will help people with questions. And even if, you go and you judge something and you come home afterwards and you're having one of those sleepless nights because you're thinking, I hope I did the right thing. Because judges have the intention of always doing the right thing and doing right by competitors. And when something goes a little awry, there's a sleepless night because, oh my goodness, did I place? Was I fair to that competitor? I'm trying so hard to be fair. And judges really, really have sleepless nights if this happens. And calling a colleague and saying, hey, I did this. And would you have done it that way? And maybe a more experienced colleague says, Well, that was fine, but here's another suggestion of another way to handle that that might be effective. That kind of support is very helpful, and we have that a lot in WD. This happens. We call on each other, and it's awesome. Our stewards which are our TDs, are so helpful to us also.
So kind of on those, since you said you were on the rules committee, currently it's Western dressage competitors do not have to wear helmets. Do you think that will change at some point?
Well, what is really exciting about WD, which is I'm going sideways on the topic on you here, but I've never been involved in an organization where we were allowed to have so much input. And almost just about every month at the first of the month, the president's letter from Cindy Butler comes out. And then directly after that, every member that gave an email address gets a survey. And those surveys are full of questions. How do you feel about this? What do you think about that? We're considering a rule change about this. Like just last year, there were some changes to some of the TAC rules and some of the clothing rules in order to keep us looking still Western, but to accommodate things like we need sun shirts and, we need this and we need that. We still need to look Western and we need to appreciate our heritage, but we need to be modernizing and we need to be allowing this for safety. And so these discussions are on the table all the time and constant, and we're allowed to have input. And that input drives those changes. As a judge, what I can tell you is right now, like I judge a lot live and I judge a lot online. And way more than 60% of people are wearing helmets. So they're allowed to wear a helmet. They can wear a safety vest. There's a lot of safety equipment. Of course, the horses look really obedient, but that doesn't mean that a horse won't act up.
Right.
But there's a lot of helmets out there. So there's no bad feeling about helmets. And it's always being discussed. So at least with WD, it's on the table.
Right.
And it's being discussed.
How about the use of curb bits at the very basic levels? I mean, in traditional dressage, you graduate to the double bridle. The curb bit is the second bit. And that, there was all that controversy of whether it would be at third level or not, definitely at the FEI levels. And then the controversy of whether the FEI level even has to require the double bridle. But I know in Western, I see riders at intro and basic, and they are using a curb.
Yes. Well, it's really interesting that you asked me, and I'm glad you did, because it causes a lot of, I know my colleagues in dressage are kind of confused by this. And so it's interesting to talk about what we have going on in WD is a lot of the horses come over from other divisions into these divisions. And it's actually many of the horses that are in intro and in basic aren't actually green horses. These are some of them, a lot of them, mature horses with very sophisticated riders. And the interesting thing about the riding is that way earlier in riders' lives, and sometimes if you're in a Western division, not Western dressage, but a different Western division, you were taught your original equitation was on a curb. And they have a lot of information and a lot of training on how to use a curb. And they have information which is a little different from the way we ride, in that when we think about a half halt, we think about gathering a horse up, and then the horse has a check in the bridle, and that release of the half halt is there. And in these Western divisions, the idea and the theory is that, the curb engaged for a moment, the horse changes its balance, the release is complete, and then the horse and the ride is supposed to continue in some kind of self-balance in a frame for that division without constant curb contact. Well, if you think about that, those people are thinking about self-carriage in a frame. And so we have people in these divisions that have some curb use. They understand how the curb works and the release of the half halt. and they understand that they want a horse in a connection without curb pressure constant. And then we have some horses that aren't green in here. So there's a whole lot of leeway in intro and basic. I mean, we do have some green horses, and a lot of times you will see those in just a simple snaffle or, you know, a D-bit or one of our dressage snaffles. But we do have people, because they're new to Western dressage, they have the idea, which I think is a great idea, that they don't start in the middle of our tests or the middle of our patterns. They start at intro because they don't know anything about Western dressage. And they come into these lower patterns, and they're fairly sophisticated riders and maybe mature horses that have already dealt with a curb and are being ridden in a curb. And they come in and they do intro pattern and they move through basic, and they're progressing because they're learning how to ride tests, and they're learning how they're going to be judged, and they're being evaluated and moving up correctly through levels in a system, and they may never have worked in any kind of a dressage system. So it does sort of surprise people. And they, you know, and like all riding, you know, we have some riders that are doing awesome jobs. And then, like all divisions, there's good riding and there's not so good riding. And then you'll have somebody that's bouncing around on the bridle. And as judges, we're writing down, hey, and luckily we're allowed to write, hey, why don't you consider, you know, moving off a curb and getting into a snaffle? You know, why don't you try, you know, maybe a dressage snaffle or a different bridle, or, you know, work on your hands and make them independent. You know, we say all the things that we're allowed to say. So there's
that brings me to another question, Ida. I have a friend who is a WD rider, and she's going through the judges training now. And she asked me a question a while ago. And we had we spoke for hours on the phone about this, and I'm not sure that we ever really came to an understanding. But so my question is, we were talking about the connection in WD, and that what she was getting from a lot of judges, and of course these are, you know, traditional, you know, L graduates, not WD judges, was that her reins were too slack and that her horses were not connected, and that she was trying to create soft connection where the horse was carrying himself in self-carriage, not off the bridle. So I'm not asking a question. I'm making a comment that's sort of a question.
Okay, I'm with you. You know, we all talk about, you know, ultimately at Grand Prix, you know, the idea would be that we primarily don't, you know, the ultimate Grand Prix would be that the horse would carry itself, and if you use the reins, it would only be to produce really bend, you know, and then, you know, the horse is really supposed to be in self-carriage. They don't balance particularly on the reins, and especially in French classical, that they're inside of the bridle and in self-carriage. And we do talk about this some, and this gal that was talking about asking her horse to be more inside of the bridle and in self-carriage and in connection without leaning on the bridle and in a frame and in a balance. That's true. And here's the tricky part for people. To be a really good instructor and really good judge at WD, you really, in my opinion, really need to understand a lot about how horses balance themselves at upper levels, truly in self-carriage and inside of the bridle rather than on the bit. And that younger, greener horses tend to be a little bit more in a contact, in a rein, and that is a style of riding, and it's a great style of riding, and there's nothing bad about it. But what's interesting about WD is because you're allowed to ride in a snaffle, and you can ride in a curb, and you can ride two-handed or one-handed if you wanted to, either of these ways of balancing a horse is recognized as good horsemanship when it is done well. And when it's done well, the result is a horse through its back, engaged, active, relaxed, muscles look supple, the horse shows bend. The end product's the same. How you got there is a little different. But that isn't any different from the German system and the French classical system. Those are two systems that good riding, when it's done well, ends up with the same results. And we're kind
That's
of
a really
there.
nice way of putting it, and it's beautiful. When it's done well, it's beautiful and it's harmonious and it's safe. So it's all the things that WD is looking for.
Yes, and what we're trying to do is to be open-minded and not critical of how you affect your connection, as long as we don't perceive it as being detrimental to the horse or heavy. I mean, obviously, just like DR riding, WD doesn't want horses that look like they lean on the bridles or pull in the reins. You know, none of that kind of riding is happy in any division.
Right.
But it is, I do understand that our colleagues come into this, and especially because curbs aren't used until third level and then through FEI. And quite frankly, most poor people, they take their riding lessons and they ride up through third level and fourth level, and then all of a sudden they're at Pre-St. George, they got to throw the double bridle on it. In reality, there's very little instruction in the United States about how curbs actually work and what the end result is of how to use a curb and when it's appropriate and how much to use it or not use it. We have wonderful FEI riders that are lovely and well-schooled, but you know, the average student, you wouldn't say that this was a large part of the riding lesson program. So
not at all.
Then people come into Western dressage and they're kind of like, well, they've seen a lot of curb abuse. And it doesn't occur to them that these other divisions, that these people started out in curbs and that their riding instructors might not understand, you know, fill in the blank, something complicated about dressage. Maybe they don't understand what the shape and bend of a half pass is or whatever, but they understand curbs because they've been riding 20, 30, 40 years, however long it is. They've been using curbs and different kinds of bits, unusual bits, different bits, and they have bitting experience, which it's different, you know, they're different divisions. So it's hard to, you know, sometimes we're not open-minded enough to really appreciate. I think it's very important to appreciate other people's expertise and be open-minded and step into a place and not immediately say, well, I don't do that. I don't like that. Or to stand there and say, wow, that's different. Now let me see if this is working. How's this working? Is it working?
Yeah.
Wow, that looks, I don't know how they did that because maybe I don't know how to do that, but wow, that looks good. That's where we have to be to understand and to learn. I love this now because I get to share all this with everybody. And before, this was all, you know, as a dressage person, I couldn't even mention I had a Western saddle. My colleagues would look sideways at me, and some of them still do. I mean, you can't imagine, there's a few negative remarks at the dinner table sometimes at a dressage show. You know, like, you do that stuff and you can tell they don't approve. Okay, well, I'm sorry, but I'm having fun.
There you go.
And it really is supposed to be fun, isn't it?
It is a whole different culture. The people are extremely welcoming. I find them open-minded, and they're willing to absorb dressage because they're just fascinated with wanting to be great horsemen. They don't even want to be average horsemen. It's not about going to the Olympics. It's not their personal riding, but this bond with their horses, and they cry over their horses and they hug them. And, you know, you see somebody in a ring patting their horse in the test, and I feel like jumping up and down. This is allowed in Western dressage.
Yeah.
And you're like, that makes you kind of get, you know, teary-eyed. And I just love that. So yeah, it's a whole different, they're pretty welcoming and yeah, open-minded, So they don't want us to look too dressage. You really got to try to look a little bit Western. But hey, I get to buy a fun hat, and I got some cool chaps, and I get to wear rhinestones, and it's fun.
Oh, the bling is great. So what you're telling me, Ida, is I can grab myself a Western saddle and plop it on Leo, and I can go show Western dressage.
I think you can.
I'm kidding. I am kidding. I'm kidding. There's more to Western dressage than the tack. I know that.
I want to see you out there. I will tell you this. For those people that start to do this, the tack is different. And you have to get used to how the tack work and how it functions and figure out which saddles and which bridles within. And luckily, they allow such a huge amount of tack and bridles and whatever. So you do need to find what works for you and for your horse. And the feel in the Western saddles is different. So it takes a little time for the horse and the rider, but I encourage anybody to give it a try. I really do.
The few times I've ridden in Western saddles, and it's, they weren't my saddles, and a saddle is something very personal. I found them very uncomfortable. The tree did not fit me well, but I've seen that there are as many Western saddles out there as there are traditional dressage saddles, so I'm sure I could find something that would be comfortable.
Yes, and one of the things that's super, super exciting, like this week I was just testing a saddle for OSS saddles, and they're developing saddles specifically for us for Western dressage. They meet all of our requirements for Western dressage for legality. But like, for example, I'm talking to a man about I can only accept a narrow twist. It really hurts my hips if the twist is too wide. I can't be sitting in the back seat. I need the seat to be in the right place. I need the fenders to drop straight down under my seat. They are developing saddles that meet the needs of being Western and are legal for Western dressage, but are developed for more this kind of athletic work, and specifically for Western dressage athletic work. And they're out there. So you can, you don't give up. They are out there.
Well, that sort of ties in with another question, because we think about how difficult saddle fitting is both for horses and for their humans. And I know that Western saddles are mostly designed for a type. It was Western, it was cutting horses, and it was being out on the range all day, and it's a different kind of feel. How do you accommodate that for the different breeds that are moving into Western dressage, like the warm bloods that are moving in and thoroughbreds? And are you finding that there's a certain breed that tends to excel at Western dressage versus traditional dressage, and why?
It's funny you asked me about this, because at the World's show and at our Global International online show, we have between 50 and 60 breeds constantly.
Wow.
We never have less than 50 breeds. And then Cindy Butler and several other people gave a lecture to USEF at the meeting in January, and they had all these great charts and flow charts, and they showed how many breeds there were, which was phenomenal. But then one of the things that they were showing in this chart, and they had this pie chart, and it was all color-coded and everything, was that if you went in with whatever breed you had as good a chance as anybody else to win. And it was amazing, the statistics that they had, and 3 or 4 charts to show this, that, the percentage of winning was not one particular breed. It was spread out over all the breeds. Now, quarter horses happened to win more, but it was only because percentage-wise, more quarter horses went in.
Right.
But percentage-wise, the percentage across the board was the same. So, if 400 Morgans went in and 41, if 800 Arabs went in, it would be double. It was like amazing. And so what we know is that if you are well schooled, you're doing a good job with your work, you're an accurate rider, you're interested in dressage principles, you're paying attention to the tests, if you go in, your chances are excellent. And we're so excited about that.
Yeah, that's great.
It's great. It's great. So we just tell people, you do need your horse to have, it doesn't have to be a spectacular mover, the walk 4-beat, the jog 2-beat, the lope 3-beat. Yes. Regularity, of course.
Right.
Oh, and more exciting than that, like we have the most incredible gaited horses.
Yeah.
And until I came here, I had given people riding lessons a few times on gaited horses, but not a lot of experience with it. And now all of a sudden, it's like I'm coaching people, I'm teaching people, I'm judging people with Tennessee walkers. And in the Worlds last year, I was judging. I had a horse come in and do the tolt. And I was like, this is amazing. It was amazing. We do keep those horses in separate classes just so everyone doesn't kind of go, oh my gosh. The horses that are gaited are presented in separate classes. And at the top of my paper, it says, it lets me know that it's a gaited horse, it's in a gaited class, and it's judged against other gaited horses.
Yeah.
But there again, there's all these horses that need a second job and need a second opportunity. And, we don't want them to go to the rescues. We want them to come into divisions and come into middle class America's hands and have an opportunity to be improved and be more healthy and have a longer life by progressing in dressage, in Western dressage.
Yeah.
Cool. That's great.
It is. It's exciting.
So my last question, we've started asking this to our people so that Aviva and I can build a reading list. Do you have a favorite horse book, or a favorite book, I guess, if you don't have a favorite horse one, that's either fiction or nonfiction?
Well, I have, if I can quickly tell you, I had 3 books I wanted to mention to you.
Okay.
Because I own the entire USDF certification reading list because I was coaching USDF certification applicants, so I had the whole list. And in all those years I was in Florida, we always had the library with us, and we read a book a week and we checked them out. One of the most checked out books, and which is popular and everyone loves her book, is Janet Foy's book, Dressage for the Not So Perfect Horse. I mean, you just can't not mention that book.
Yeah.
But my all-time favorite, and once people looked at it, it's not as well known, but once people saw this book, this is my favorite. On top of that, Janet's is great, but Dressage Solutions, A Rider's Guide by Arthur Kottas.
Oh, okay.
And that book, Arthur is a retired director of the Spanish riding school, and he still comes to America and does clinics, and I've clinicked with him a lot. This book, for me, is so clear, and I recommend it even to WD riders because there are phenomenal explanations, large print, easy to read, good diagrams. There's also photographs, and there's photographs of this is good, this is not so good, this is good, this is not so good. And it's very, very clear. So that's my favorite. But there's, as you know, there's so many.
Right.
The last book, which I think is very significant and is maybe not what you would have even imagined, is that I buy copies and pass out to people a book on coaching, which is called Woden, Wooden. And this was Coach John Woden and his book, A Lifetime of Observations and Reflections on and Off the Court. And he was a basketball coach.
Yeah.
And he was coaching people like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and he was coaching for the NCAA, and they had 10 national championships in 12 years, 7 of which were in a row. From 1964 to 1975, he's probably considered to be one of the best coaches in history. Now, this man's whole book is a tiny book, and you could probably read it, like in a day, but his book is all about character, integrity, comportment, how to lead by being a leader, and how to encourage and not discourage, And it's amazing. And so I pass this book out to all the riding instructors that come to me that say, hey, I have difficult clients. I find people difficult to teach. And this book is phenomenal on how to coach, how to encourage, how to teach by leading correctly. And we don't talk about that so much anymore.
It's Wooden was his last name. Yeah.
Yes. Wooden. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So those are my favorites.
Well, Ida, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day and sharing all of your insights. This was quite an education, and I think we can encourage everyone to be open-minded, and maybe if they're looking for something else to do, to give Western Dressage a try.
I appreciate you asking me. It was so kind, and I was honored to be with you. Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Aviva. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thanks for listening to the Dressage Today podcast. If you've missed any episodes or to subscribe, go to Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. While you're there, please rate and review the show. Learn more and read in-depth training articles at dressagetoday.com, or you can visit our subscription video site, ondemand.dressagetoday.com. Be sure to give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. Happy riding, and we'll see you at X. The Dressage Today podcast is a production of the Equine Podcast Network, an entity of Equine Network, LLC.